Gege Akutami's original draft chapter for Jujutsu Kaisen has just been released, revealing the early concepts of not just the entire series, but insane changes like the culling game being the original center point for the main narrative, as well as even more drastic differences like Sukuna taking over Megumi instead of Yuji. In this video, we'll be going over all the pages of Gege's first ever draft of Jujutsu Kaisen with full translation, and we'll see if there's any other secrets we can uncover. Hit that like button and subscribe if you'd like to keep seeing content like this in your feed, because there is only more to come. The story opens up on two figures casually strolling through what looks to be similar to the Zenin clan's underground training hall we see in Perfect Preparation. The characters present are early designs for Gojo and Yaga Masamichi, and they're discussing something that has been plaguing the country of Japan over the last couple of weeks. There's a mystery sickness that's suddenly springing up in people, an illness Gojo refers to as a malediction, a strange epidemic that takes ordinary human beings and forces a curse technique upon them against their will. Yaga assumes it's a weird occurrence that will just pass with time. However, Gojo believes it's something too serious and calculated to be natural. Cut to what seems to be a turtle racing competition, we're introduced to our former main character, Itadori Yuji, keeping his outgoing and clownish personality, not beating his underage gambling accusations. When the turtle Yuji bets on loses, it's revealed he's about to graduate high school from his title card. It's clear that not only was Yuji's whole personality already worked out by Akutami, most of his foreshadowed development is going to be the same as well, despite some later changes, but we'll get into that. And then we change perspectives to a familiar face, yet different surname, who is now the main protagonist of the story, which, in true Gege fashion, he's already introduced both Gojo and the Durtaragonist before his primary character. But we're introduced to this draft's version of Fushiguro, whose early concept name is currently Wanabuchi Megami. The name Wanabuchi splits into two kanji, Wani meaning alligator or crocodile, while Buchi stands for the depths, a deep pool or an abyss. While Fushiguro is a flower that stands for turning point, I can see why both make sense for Megami, a character who, although not quite apparent in this draft, we know from the actual series has quite the connection to Shadows, especially with where Megami ends up later in the story. This version of Megami is also about to graduate. However, much to his guidance counselor's disappointment, Megami seems to have no desire to pursue future education or scholarships for college, and Megami really would much rather be at home right now than dealing with this. It's here that Megami gets a call from someone, using this as the perfect excuse to escape. On Megami's way home, he notices Itadori running to the hospital, and from here, we get almost verbatim the exact same scene between Yuji and his grandpa that we see in the first chapter of actual Jujutsu Kaisen. As Grandpa Itadori meets his end, he really wants to tell Yuji about his parents, but Yuji just brushes it off, and then his grandpa gives him the speech about being strong and saving people. As Grandpa Itadori passes and Yuji cries as he calls the nurses, Megami is present, hiding behind the wall and watching the entire scene unfold as a sympathetic observer. As Megami gets back home, we're introduced to his familiar older half-sister Sumiki, although in this timeline, her family name is Sugisawa. While the kanji of the surname just translates to cedar and swamp, there is an urban legend surrounding a Sugisawa village. The tale explains, once there was a village where a man went mad. Some speculate it's because he found out he had tuberculosis, the thought of his own mortality making him snap and lose all empathy for humankind. In his tantrum, the man killed everyone in the village, and supposedly the whole country of Japan just marked it off the map in fear of the evil energy coming from the area. It's become a cultural phenomenon notoriously known as an impossible to find spot. Although you can easily find accounts detailing to have been to Sugisawa village on message boards, they're usually pretty vague and tend to just be creative writing projects. And most rumors just claim it's been lost to the spirit realm. Quite an interesting detail, especially for how we know Sumiki's treated in the original story of Jujutsu Kaisen. And it seems Gege did in fact have similar foundations for Sumiki's character in the draft as well. She's very sickly, and Megami chastises her for cooking with an open flame, although Sumiki can tell something's wrong. Megami admits he's upset over Itadori's grandpa dying, and even though he admits they don't know each other, Sumiki says he should have reached out and became friends. We change perspectives once more, however this time it's to an unknown character. This woman is making a phone call that goes to voicemail to a man she refers to as Papa. She tells Papa that she practiced a lot today. She even, quote-unquote, killed one with only one strike. She's gonna go to the hospital tomorrow, but not because she's jealous or upset, but because she has a plan to become the #1 in the culling game. We then cut to a pitch black room as the phone message plays on the other side, and surprisingly, it's Gojo on the other side, with what I assume is early concept art for Ijichi. Gojo confirms this girl as a malediction patient, and asks where her father is now, and Ijichi reveals her dad's been dead for 2 months. In typical Gojo fashion, he sighs out loud and says she's already gone batshit crazy, as Gojo tells Ijichi to dispatch sorcerers to all hospitals in the area, all the different things that the girl mentioned ringing in Gojo's head. Back at the hospital, Itadori recognizes Megumi from yesterday and kindly greets him, asking if Sumiki is his girlfriend. Megumi just vaguely tells Yuji she's important to him and refuses to elaborate. As Sumiki is checked on by a doctor, Megumi tells Yuji the reason they're here is because Sumiki has been diagnosed with a malediction. Now, to Yuji, a member of the general public, to him, maledictions are just fake illnesses and conspiracies. But Megumi confirms to Yuji it's very real and very dangerous. A malediction is a benign brain tumor that's normally harmless. At most, it creates a pattern or a tattoo mark on the body. However, in Sumiki's case, the malediction seems to be affecting her vision and causing it to deteriorate more and more by the day. And as the doctor they're seeing admits, no matter what tests they try, they can't even find an origin to the problem to begin treating it. Everything they do claims she's a healthy, normal girl, despite the clear adverse side effects of the malediction. Now, in this moment, the draft transitions to a future scene. I'm not sure if there's missing context in between, or for the purposes of the draft, everything was just fast forwarded, but it appears that the woman who claimed to be in the culling games has attacked the same hospital that Yuji, Megumi, and Sumiki are inside of. Sumiki's knocked out, everyone's in danger, and Megumi is forced to consider the fact that his sister might die here. But in this very moment, a tattoo sprouts across the back of Megumi's neck. Lying on the ground, a shadow appears behind him with multiple mouths and eyes. It tells Megumi to wake up. Everyone around him is going to die, and he needs to save them. As Megumi regains consciousness, the being explains it's Megumi's malediction, one that was just born at the most convenient of times, it says. As it grows larger and envelops Megumi's body, Megumi desperately asks what kind of monster this is, but the being says it doesn't need to know. In fact, Megumi should consider himself lucky. Of all the maledictions prepared for the culling game, he is the strongest. It repeats the same thing over and over. Evoke me. You don't need to do anything. I'll save you. Evoke me. Let me possess you. We get a full page spread of the disgusting monster emerging from Megumi's body, attacking the woman. And then we skip ahead again, assumedly after defeating the culling game player. This demon takes a better shape, becoming Megumi, but just with a pair of horns. Screaming out and laughing about how much fun the culling games are going to be. A confused Yuji asks who this new Megumi is, and the malediction tells Itadori to be quiet or he'll eat him next. Right on cue, Gojo arrives at the hospital to keep the possessed Megumi in check. Gojo tells the malediction to back off as he wants to prioritize saving as many lives as possible. But the malediction is much more interested to find Gojo himself doesn't have one. He's actually a full-blown sorcerer. However, Gojo corrects the malediction. He's not just a sorcerer, he's the strongest one. After easily outspeeding Megumi and grabbing him by the back of the head, he dispels the possession. And while trying to bring a very confused Yuji up to speed on what's going on here, suddenly a mouth rips open on Megumi's hand, making the same sound as a school bell would. An announcement rings out to what seems to be all participants in the culling game. And it's here that we get some really cool early concept designs for Nanami, a gavel, so I can assume that's Higuruma, and we know Gege revealed he wanted to design Kashima with a scythe, so I'm going to have to assume that's who that is as well. Loudly declaring that the required amount of patience has been met, and now the culling games can truly begin. The announcement reveals that Gojo was correct to expect the worst. To which Gojo says, forget the formalities, I'm taking both of you to a school that teaches sorcery now. And to me, this is one of the most interesting segments of the draft, because it reveals that not only were the culling games something that Akutami has been gearing up for since the series' inception, it was clearly a direction for the story to go before the author even come up with the overall idea of curse spirits. The random illnesses called maledictions seem to be placeholders for that, as quote-unquote curses were originally just meant to possess human beings that had the malediction mark. The malediction that possesses Megami, although never referred to by any name in the draft, can easily be identified as the early idea of Sukuna. The dead giveaway for this being the malediction referring to himself as the strongest curse, as well as the hatred of Yuji for no good reason. And you can still see how much of the start of the draft made it into the actual Jujutsu Kaisen, with the hospital being the main jumping point of the protagonist's journey, albeit under completely different circumstances. You have Gojo entering the situation and fighting Sukuna with relative ease. Sukuna fingers are absent from the narrative entirely, it seems, and instead Megami just conveniently acquires Sukuna as a randomly selected culling game patient at the most convenient moment. And this whole perspective on the culling game shows how much more the human versus human and curse possession dynamic was taking a larger role in the story, as opposed to how we'll see in the final product, disaster curses and the whole Shibuya incident story intertwining with everything, which it feels almost weird to see that the second portion of the story that some of the audience feels is actually disconnected from Jujutsu Kaisen's quote-unquote original premise was actually the considered concept from the beginning. The rest of the story is our new protagonist coming to fully understand their situation and prepare for the culling games. We're introduced to the, again, what seemed to be fully developed, trio of Maki, Panda, and Inumaki, who are all third years in the draft in order to still be seniors to Yuji and Megami. Inumaki still talks in rice ingredients, and weirdly enough, when Panda mentions the malediction problem potentially causing trouble between the higher-ups, Maki just casually says if they get in the way, they'll just murder them all, which is interesting to me because it does seem like Gege definitely wanted to take Maki in the anti-establishment way, yet this quality is surprisingly absent in Gojo's character. So it seems Maki's bringing down of authority was moved towards the Zenin clan, while defying the higher-ups was given to Gojo. We get a quick transition to a memory of Sumiki, hearing her say her classic line of, "Instead of having time to curse others, I'd spend it thinking of those precious to me." And then we cut to Sumiki, who's in the hospital, and in place of her malediction tattoo is a now wide open eye looking out of it, potentially hinting that Gege always meant for Sumiki to become a possessed villain. We get a cool double spread of Jujutsu High's headquarters as Gojo gives Yuji the tour and introduces him to the concept of sorcery. While Sumiki, for all they know, is still in a coma and hospitalized, Megami has been awake for days and being questioned by the third years for information on maledictions and the culling game. Sukuna's surprised and happy to see the brat again, to which Gojo takes this opportunity to explain the two different types of maledictions to Yuji. There's the first type, which simply grants their victim a curse technique and nothing else, and then there's others like Megami who are possessed by some kind of evil curse spirit. Gojo contrasts what Sukuna said in the beginning of the draft by saying Megami got the worst possible draw in the lottery. And Gojo puts to Megami the same ultimatum that Yaga gives Yuji in the original Jujutsu Kaisen. Megami can die now and maintain his innocence, or he can live with the burden of his sins and work to fix them. Gojo admits to the duo of Yuji and Megami that no matter how strong he is, 30 days is not long enough for him to track down and defeat the mastermind behind all of this. And because the culling games are built foundationally the same as the culling game that we know, in 30 days, if a patient hasn't killed anyone, that culling game player will die, creating the very same dilemma we know from our version, which is Megami's sister Sumiki has become a player against her will, and Megami does not want her to participate. The only way for Megami to get Sumiki out of participating is by acquiring 100 points of his own and making a rule that can save her from that fate. Yuji wants to tag along, and Megami tries to argue with Itadori, saying he has no real connection to this or even a malediction of his own. But when he thinks of his grandpa and how he wanted Yuji to save others, Yuji feels like this isn't something he can just ignore, calling his grandpa's final words a curse in their own right. Gojo accepts both of their perspectives, but he doesn't beat around the bush. He tells them that they're in hell, but they have to make it as decent as possible. They can't safely remove the maledictions from Sumiki and Megami, but they can find and kill 10 patients of the culling game, get 100 points, and make their own rule to exit the game, which means the two of them are gonna have to learn how to survive in this world of sorcery. especially Megumi, because if Megumi gets taken control of too many times, he could potentially lose his body forever. As Gojo takes Megumi away to learn how to control his malediction, the third years try to stop Yuji from participating in the culling game and tell him to go home because this isn't his place. But Yuji refuses, telling them if Megumi has chosen to walk the dark path, he shouldn't have to do it alone, and that for what both he and Tsumiki did for him, Yuji's more than willing to walk that dark path with Megumi. To which immediately makes all the third years back off, Panda revealing that was enough to pass their test and accept him into Jutsu High. Meanwhile, Megumi is introduced to Principal Yaga, who even in this draft is the leading specialist in cursed corpse creation. Through training and proper rituals, Gojo and Yaga will be able to overwrite Megumi's malediction into one that he can draw power out of. Yaga declares Megumi give him 500 squats before Megumi immediately regrets his place in the world. And fast forwarding 8 days later, Yuji and Megumi are studying together and learning about different curses from the senior sorcerers. It seems like Yuta is also appearing in this shot. As tomfoolery ensues, Megumi wonders to himself if it's really okay to drag an innocent person like Yuji into this. Itadori reminds Megumi of his sister, pure-hearted and kind, and he doesn't think someone like that should have to drench their hands in blood. Just as Megumi goes to speak his mind, his hand rings out with a mouth appearing on it. A familiar bell rings out, announcing a rule change to the game. Yuji is surprised, considering it's only been 8 days. But similar to the start of the culling game in the actual story, the first rule enacted is a rule that allows everyone to see the locations, names, and point count of every available patient in the game. And honestly, just like the whole possession portion in the hospital, the start to the draft's version of the culling game is an almost identical mirror to the one we actually got. As after gaining access to the full roster of 133 patients, Megumi and Yuji decide to use this information to only hunt down the players with points, hoping that they can convince them through either negotiation or, as Megumi claims, by force, to relinquish their 100 points to save Tsumiki and get a way out of the game. Yuji reminds Megumi that these people are going to be murderers, but Megumi doesn't care, saying he'll rip their skin off and show the world their true selves if he has to. Megumi reveals he knows exactly where they're hiding, a section of Japan called the Black World, where malediction patients are free to enact chaos without sorcerer interference. And I will say, I'm glad that Gege shifted the possession aspect of the character from Megumi to Yuji, because my only gripe with everything here is that Megumi's kind of right when he says Yuji has nothing to do with this. Yuji's entire curse with his grandfather is definitely reason enough for Yuji to want to go out and save people. But I think the story makes a lot more sense when Yuji not only wants to save people, but is forced into this world by the Sukuna Fingers. And Megumi is already a part of it, therefore wanting to use his position in the Jujutsu world to save Yuji. Rather than both of them just being innocent people that just get caught up in all of this, and Yuji's just that good of a guy to be a friend to Megumi in these amazingly traumatizing situations. Focus then shifts from Megumi and Yuji to a flashback of a familiar character working at his office firm. This character's manager is pestering him to do overtime work, despite it being the end of the week, and quite frankly, he's being a bit of a douche about it. Meanwhile, the manager's getting called by all his coworkers to go to the bar and harass young college girls. The worker is angry about it, but does the overtime work anyway, internally admitting to himself he knows he'll never say no, thinking it would be nice to go out and enjoy the finer things every once in a while. Come Monday, the chief manager shows his face to compliment the other manager on sacrificing his weekend to do such a good job on the report he submitted. The office worker can hear his chief manager singing praises, frustrated knowing he's the one that sacrificed his weekend to do the work. We get a flash of the malediction tattoo on the office worker's wrist, when the chief manager stumbles over to the character's desk, claiming an order came through under his name that was a huge mistake, showing the character a forged signature and revealing not only did the manager take credit for his work, the manager submitted bad work under the office worker's name to make him look bad. As the character rises from his desk, his manager yells louder, asking if he's even listening, to which the character asks his chief manager if he thinks his job is hard. And when the chief answers that it's hard with awful employees like him, the character says, "Fine, How about we all quit then? Before we cut to a page of them surrounded by corpses, presumably killing all of them with their malediction powers. The title card introduces this character as Nanami Kento, a culling game patient with over 163 points. The resemblance this draft has to the actual start of the arc is jarring, even down to finishing off on the introduction of our first culling game character similar to Higuruma. Who knows what Akutami had in store for characters like Nanami if they were evil, as it's easy to see even sorcerers like Meimei or Kusakabe in different iterations of their characters in this free-for-all setting. Listen, I love the culling games, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys all think about this. Thank you all so much for watching to the end. Leave me comments down below and hit that like button if you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.